In this clip, we look at the substitution and income effects. First, we look at the pure case of an income effect. When the nominal income of the consumer increases, then the consumer will be able to buy more goods and services. That means that his or her purchasing power increased, so the real income increased. This is a clear, pure case of a positive income effect. Needless to say that in case of a reduction in the nominal income, we are going to get a reduction in the purchasing power that is a pure negative income effect. So we start with a given nominal income, and that, together with the price ratio of the two goods, is going to define us a budget constraint line. An increase in the nominal income is going to push the budget constraint line outwards. The area below a budget constraint line is a good measure of the real income. Originally, this area had all affordable bundles, but after the change in income, this higher area triangle is going to capture the affordable bundles. So clearly there was an increase in real income. If we have a more complex situation, like the change in the price ratio of the two goods, then there will be an income effect present. We know this because by one of the goods becoming more expensive, the real income of the consumer will reduce. Look at this visualization. This is the original budget constraint line. If the price of X goes up, then the budget constraint line will modify so that the intercept along the x-axis becomes smaller, which leads to a steeper budget constraint line. You can see easily that this led to a reduction of the purchasing power of the given nominal income. This is because the area of the triangle under the new budget constraint line is smaller than the area of the triangle below the original budget constraint line. This also means that the consumer cannot anymore reach the same utility level, so there is a reduction in welfare. But income effect is not the only effect at play here. A rational consumer may actually change the ratio at which they consume the two goods. Because X becomes now, in relative terms, more expensive than Y, it may be logical and rational for the consumer to reduce their consumption of X and increase their consumption of Y. So the price ratio change also resulted in a change in the composition of the bundle. This change is called the substitution effect. Originally, the consumer could achieve this particular level of utility or indifference curve and chose a bundle of Y1 and X1. The new budget constraint line will only allow the consumer to reach the green indifference curve with a lower utility level, and the new optimal choice will be Y2 and X2. Now, the ratio between Y1 and X1 can and will be most likely be different from the ratio of Y2 and X2. This change in the composition is going to be the substitution effect. The total effect can be calculated as Y2 minus Y1 for good Y and X2 minus X1 for the good X. So, total effect refers to the difference between the old bundle and the new optimal bundle. The greatest challenge is to isolate the income effect from the substitution effect. What you observe in practice are just the two optimal bundles. The difference of these two bundles we refer to as total effect, but this total effect is composed of two effects, substitution and income effect, and we might want to separate these. We know that the substitution effect is only about the change in the composition of the bundle. So graphically, you could think of this as a movement along the original indifference curve. The income effect is responsible for not being able to reach the same indifference curve than before. So this is going to result in the movement away from the original indifference curve to a new indifference curve. Using these theoretical considerations, we can devise a graphical way to separate the two effects. In the original situation, the agent is going to use a bundle composed of x1 and y1. Now, there is an increase in the price of the good X. At this particular price change, so with such a reduction in the real income, the original indifference curve cannot be reached anymore. So the consumer will adjust the bundle so that it has x2 amount of x and y2 amount of y. The difference between y2 and y1 and x2 and x1 is called the total effect. In this case, you can see that the total effect is positive for both goods. Now, the challenge is, hence, to separate income and substitution effects. Because the idea of the substitution effect is that it is basically a movement along the original indifference curve, you can calculate the substitution effect by taking the new budget constraint line and shift it until it just touches the old original indifference curve. When you look at the optimal choice at this theoretical point, then you can see that the new bundle is going to be y prime and x prime. So using our ideas about the substitution effect, it seems that y prime minus y1 and x prime minus x1 should be the substitution effect. You can see that the substitution effect works as expected. Because x became more expensive, the substitution effect was negative on x. On the other hand, because y became relatively cheaper, the effect of the substitution effect is positive, and you see that y prime is above y1. So if there was no income effect at all, then the consumer would simply consume less x and more y. But this is not the only effect, because the rest of the change must be due to income effect. Now you can see that the income effect is nothing else than for y, y2 minus y prime, and for x, it is x2 minus x prime. If you add up the substitution and the income effects for a given good, then it will result in the total effect. So, the total effect is indeed a sum of the substitution and income effect. Now you can see that for good X, the direction of the substitution and income effects were the same, both are negative. But for Y, this is not so obvious. Y, the substitution effect, caused the consumer to consume more of Y. The reduction in real income forced the consumer to give up part of her consumption of Y. So the two effects has an opposite sign. Now, altogether, you can see that the income effect is the dominant one here. We say that the income effect dominated the substitution effect, and that's why finally the total effect is negative even for good y, but it does not have to be so. Actually, it would also be possible that the substitution effect is the larger one, and then substitution effect would dominate the income effect. And then you would find that even though the real income of the consumer reduced, finally still more Y is consumed than before.